I think it's appropriate to quote, to start today's rally, Gary Botting, who is an expert on extradition law, who reminds us, although Canada is a nominal parliamentary democracy, when it comes to extradition, the government could not be more dictatorial in its adoption and enforcement of treaties. The Vienna Convention on Treaties requires that all international treaties be ratified. However, none of Canada's current extradition treaties has been ratified by Parliament, by any parliamentary committee, or even by the Privy Council. And so, just as a kidnapper could come and grab you and take you off, under the Extradition Act, it's the same effect. And I'm not just making that up. I'd like to quote a judge who approved an extradition. Her name is Frida Steele from the Manitoba Court, and she said in 1999 in the Turenne case that evidence presented by the requesting state at an extradition hearing, quote, should be accepted even if the judge feels it is manifestly unreliable, incomplete, false, misleading, contradictory of other evidence, or the judge feels the witness may have perjured themselves. And as we look time and time again at case after case of extradition, we see the same complete lack of due process, the same contempt for charter rights applied to individuals like Hassan Diab and many others whose lives have been completely upended and in some cases lost because of our adherence to this draconian medieval process. As we gather here today on the 8th anniversary of waiting for whether or not the Supreme Court was going to hear the appeal of Hassan Diab, it's also the anniversary, the 3rd anniversary this week, of the death of Michelle Messina. Michelle Messina was a Canadian-American woman who took her abused children from Georgia to Canada for protection and for safety. She took her case up to the Supreme Court of Canada, and she lost 4-3. But as a result of our public campaigning, we got her case reconsidered by a new government led by a man named Justin Trudeau, who had appointed an Attorney General and Minister of Justice by the name of Jody Wilson-Raybould. And in that reconsideration, we put forward new evidence that showed that even under the very narrow constrictions of the extradition law, Michelle should not be sent back to Georgia. She should be allowed to stay with her kids who had escaped the abuse here in Canada. We fought that battle for 4 additional years, but in the end, the Justice Minister, so-called Jody Wilson-Raybould, she wrote one of the most misogynistic decisions you can imagine, in which she blamed Michelle Messina for her predicament because, quote unquote, why hadn't she gone to the police? Can you imagine a feminist justice minister asking a victim of male violence why she had not gone to the police? She blamed Michelle Messina because she said, why didn't her kids go to the high school counselors and say that they were being abused? And in the biggest insult of all, she said, by taking her kids to Canada and allowing them to live, she had deprived the abusive father of his parental rights to see his children. That's the kind of sickening illogic that lays behind so many extradition decisions at the so-called ministerial stage of surrender. And it was 3 years ago this week that Michelle's body was found in the Leclerc prison in Montreal. She was so afraid of going back to Georgia and facing her abuser that she took her own life in prison. The Extradition Act has lethal consequences, and we are grateful that Hassan Diab is with us here today, but it's a reminder of just how destructive this act's impacts can be. And so today, as we gather on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and we gather in Nelson Mandela Square, we remember these historic wrongs that continue to be replicated under this horrific act that needs to be seriously amended, if not completely thrown out and started again. Our first speakers today are a group of wonderful students from Deborah Conners' class at the Sociology department at Carleton University, who've been learning a lot about Hassan Diab's case. And this is what learning is all about. Learning is not about memorizing stuff so you can pass the test. Learning is about taking the information that you get and doing something with it. And I can think of no better example of the success of education than O'Connor's class. Can we bring those students up here, and they're going to share with us some of what they've learned and some of what they're doing about that. So thank you for being here.
Thank you everybody for being here. I'm so happy to be here myself and with my students. I'm appalled that France has decided to have a trial for Hassan Diab, a man who has been proven innocent over and over and over. We want to stop this, and we want to stop it now. So I've had a very small part in the activism in support of Hassan Diab over the years, and I was really thrilled to be able to work with my students this fall on collecting signatures for the petition, on helping to publicize this event. And one of their activities was to create an Instagram account, which is Justice for Hassan Diab 2022. And I would encourage you all to follow that, both to encourage the students, but also to hear about ongoing and further actions and events that happen. So, 10 students are here today. They can wave, all of them. And we have 4 students who are each going to tell you just a little bit about their experience doing this work this fall.
Hi everyone, my name's Brogan, and so the third week of classes, Hassan Diab came to our classroom to tell us a little bit about his story. He started off by telling us that at the beginning of this whole ordeal, his lawyers told him that there is probably about a 5% chance that his extradition was going to be successful, which we unfortunately now know to be untrue. He shared his experiences about his extradition, his time spent in prison in both France and Ottawa, the time he missed spending with his kids, as well as just like the whole appeal process when he was trying to get out of prison and come back to Canada, and how like he was given hope so many times only to have it given away. And I think myself and my peers were all very kind of surprised and just very motivated with how positive he was. Despite everything that he's been through, he spent the entire time smiling and like laughing, joking with us, which I thought to be very inspiring. He's a really good man, and what's happening to him isn't fair and shouldn't be happening.
Hi everyone, my name's Maeve. After hearing from Hassan, we were all feeling very angry, frustrated, and upset, as I'm sure a lot of you are feeling right now and have been feeling for a while. Thank you. It was really hard to understand how the law could so unfairly take away someone's human rights and liberty in a country that we believe to be free and one that is supposed to protect all of us. We moved forward with our work as a class feeling very motivated. We turned our passion about the case into work to gain signatures on our petition to help the committee with this rally, and we've been advocating on social media and at classes at Carleton. We're all still feeling pretty angry and frustrated, but also motivated, and it's really nice to see you all here today feeling the same.
Hi everyone, I'm Brian, one of the students in the Sociology class. At the beginning of the class, we thought the Hassan Diab case just a normal legal dispute between two governments. After we learned the case in depth, we realized that the Hassan Diab case is connected to serious social problem and inequality in the legal system. In order to help Hassan, we create the social media account to share the case to all the people, and also we're doing the campus presentation in Carleton and to let the students have more information for the Hassan Diab case. Thank you everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael. I'd just like to say, basically to conclude all of our statements, how thankful we are to be here, how thankful all of you guys are to be here. We've all learned so much since starting this course, and yeah, we're just thankful for everyone here supporting Hassan Diab, so thank you.
That's an example of good education, and we appreciate all the work that your class has done, and may that be an example to the thousands of other students who are not here, but one day will be. A couple of years ago, some of you might have heard about the takedown arrest at the Toronto Public Library of an African-American man by the name of Gary Freeman. Gary Freeman was wanted after over 30 years for an alleged incident which took place on the streets of Chicago in 1969. Mr. Freeman was a young African-American man who was attacked and threatened by a police officer who had a gun to the back of his head. Mr. Freeman defended himself, the officer was wounded, Mr. Freeman was arrested and charged. It was clear in Chicago in 1969 and ever since that to be a black man who defended himself against a white cop, your chances of surviving prison are next to nothing. Mr. Freeman came to Canada, started a life out here, and lived peacefully as a member of the community for 35 years, when suddenly a cold case squad from Chicago that was led by the officer who was originally wounded, investigating his own case, put in an extradition request. All of the witnesses to the event have died. All of the physical evidence was gone. There was nothing left to this case other than a man like Javert in Les Miserables trying to come after Mr. Freeman. And when Mr. Freeman contested his case in court, the extradition judge was looking at different accounts. One account said there were 4 bullets that were fired. Another one said there were 13. And the Crown Counsel got up and said, 4, 13, what does it matter? And on the basis of that, Mr. Freeman was sent back to Cook County Jail. We put forward evidence in that case that said the chances of someone like Gary being tortured or even not even coming out alive were very high. The Minister of Justice's response at that time was, the United States is a democracy, and while I concede that violence may be done to Mr. Freeman, there are procedures he can undertake to lodge a complaint. And of course, the question arises, how does a corpse lodge a complaint? Now, thankfully, Mr. Freeman was able to negotiate an agreement whereby he went back and spent 30 days in the Cook County Jail. And of course, given all the publicity around that case, he thankfully was able to survive. But then Canada refused for 8 years to allow him to come back because they said he was inadmissible because of his criminal conviction that he had pleaded guilty to in Chicago. Again, another example of an individual and his family whose life was completely turned upside down because of the abusive use of the Extradition Act. Our next speaker today is the Unitarian minister, Eric Meter. And Reverend Eric has been actively involved in human rights, social justice, and anti-oppressive work. He's also spoken out for justice for another man here in Ottawa who for 20 years has been facing a secret trial security certificate and trying to stop his deportation to torture. And he spoke at a wonderful event at the Unitarian Church that was organized by Ria Hainen and various other Unitarians. So Reverend Eric, it's wonderful to have you here and to share your choice of intersectional justice with us.
Thank you. It's great to be with all of you. I was told that this would be a small gathering. This is a little more than that. Well done, everyone. When Ria asked me to be here today, I said, you know, I don't know about Dr. Diab's case. Can you educate me? Had I known there was a university course, I may have asked to audit. I read the materials. Yeah, their teacher. I read the materials and I realized, you know, I have glasses. I'm between hearing aids, but my sense of smell is very good. Something smells rotten in all of this business. This is not okay. There's something going on that smells fishy. France, their appeals court is doing this because they think that they can. We're here to say, no, you can't. You've had your chance. You've had your chance. It's over. Our government here needs to show the kind of backbone that each of us deserves, because if they can do this for Hassan Diab, they can do this for any of us. When I met Hassan earlier this afternoon, we looked into each other's eyes. Did I see in the eyes of a bomber? No. A human being fighting for his rights. And we're here to tell him he is not fighting alone. We stand with him. Enough is enough. France, let it go.
Some of you may have read earlier this month that there was an attempt to extradite a priest who had abused dozens and dozens of Inuit children in the far north. The French were appalled that someone would seek his extradition. The French don't actually extradite their citizens, but they certainly want one of ours. Our next speaker is from the Canadian Association of University Teachers. And this saga has gone on so long that perhaps we have forgotten that when this first became an issue in 2007, 2008, it really affected Hassan's ability to teach. He's a professor. He deserves to be in the classroom, and yet there was a huge hoopla that was initiated to try and prevent this decent man from teaching in his profession. So it's great that Susan Spronk here, who's a professor in the School of International Development and Global Studies at the University of Ottawa, is going to be speaking. She's also the Equity Committee co-chair of the Canadian Association of University Teachers, which represents over 72,000 folks across this country. So Susan, please come forward. Yes.
Bonjour tout le monde. I'm here as a proud union member, a proud member of the Canadian Association of University Teachers. And before coming here today, I was trying to explain to a friend who hadn't heard about this case. Wow, something that Maeve said actually. She said, it's hard to understand. But one of the ways that I explained it is I said, I don't think this would be happening to Hassan if Hassan looked like me. And the reason why I think that's important is because I do think that this is about this systemic discrimination, particularly racism, and for which I call shame on the Canadian government. I'm so angry to be here today. This has been going on since 2009. And I'd like to read from the CAUT statement when Hassan was fired from Carleton University. So we said that the university's termination of Hassan was unjust, noting that the university's actions show a blatant disregard of the principles of natural justice and due process, the legal right of an accused to the presumption of innocence, and the responsibility of a university to protect its autonomy from inappropriate outside pressure. Shame on Carleton University for that. Shame. But here today, we're here to talk about the unfair extradition, or the request for extradition of Hassan. And CAUT has been alarmed by the ongoing and outrageous violations of his civil rights. Justice will not be served for the families of the victims if an innocent man, such as Hassan, is wrongly accused for political reasons. He's lived through this experience for 15 years now, and the evidence against him has been dismissed again and again. So rather than pursuing the continued persecution of Hassan, French authorities should focus on finding the true culprit or culprits of this horrific crime for which he is accused. And I'd like you to join CAUT in calling on the Prime Minister of Canada to give immediate assurances to Hassan Diab that Canada will not accept nor accede to a second request for his extradition. Second, to urge France to put an immediate end to this continuing miscarriage of justice. And lastly, reform Canada's unjust extradition law. Thank you.
Speaking of reforming Canada's unjust extradition law, the Standing Committee of Justice at the House of Commons is about to begin. We have been seeking this for years. This is very... So we really encourage you to go to the website of the Standing Committee of Justice, attend the hearings if you can, which will be taking place just up the hill at that place that used to be surrounded by trucks. And let's tell the truth about what's going on with the Extradition Act. Our next speaker is someone who has known Hassan as a friend for a very long time. And Don is someone who is here with Nawal. They came up from the United States to attend this rally. They came a long way from Berkeley. So Nawal and Don, thank you for being here. And just to give you a sense, how many of you have ever watched the Pink Panther movies? And as you know, in the Pink Panther movies, there is a guy named Inspector Clouseau. And when you actually look at the Diab case and the number of Clouseau-like moments, you're thinking this should be part of the Pink Panther series of films. At one point in this case, based on 5 capitalized block letters on a hotel register, the French government took it to their handwriting expert and compared it to the writing in Hassan Diab's PhD submissions and said, "This is the smoking gun." It turns out that the PhD writing submissions that they were looking at were not written by Hassan Diab. They were written by Nawal. And so it was Nawal's writing that the French handwriting experts were so convinced was the smoking gun that they had to withdraw that and come up with some new evidence. Don is going to read a statement today from Don Davies. 2 Dons in a row. And Don Davies, of course, has been a passionate voice for justice for Hassan Diab, and he prepared a statement. He could not be here today, but from one Don to another.
This statement by Don Davies, MP of Vancouver Kingsway, is dated November 13, 2022, today, and I quote, "On behalf of Canada's New Democrats, I wish to express our deepest solidarity with Hassan Diab and his family in their quest for justice and exoneration. We equally want to communicate our profound disappointment that France's Court of Cassation has upheld a ruling that Hassan Diab must face trial in April 2023. Mr. Diab's case is a textbook case of harassment and politically motivated oppression. He has faced an intolerable degree of legal and judicial abuse for almost 15 years, starting with his arrest by the RCMP in 2008. He has been subject to years of strict bail conditions and detained for more than 3 years in near solitary confinement. And all of this occurred in circumstances where there is clearly no reliable evidence against him. Investigating judges in France who reviewed the actual record have ruled that the evidence against him was too weak even to take to trial. He was released in 2018 without even being formally charged. Despite this, French prosecutors have relentlessly persisted in their attempts to convict Mr. Diab. In doing so, they are ignoring serious problems with the physical evidence central to their case, patent failures of credibility by his accusers, as well as the discovery by French investigators that Mr. Diab wasn't even in Paris when the crime was committed. A Canadian extradition judge has called the evidence presented against Mr. Diab very problematic, convoluted, illogical, and suspect. Prime Minister Trudeau has publicly stated that he will stand up for Canadian citizens in such circumstances, and yet the federal government has failed to fulfill its obligations under the Extradition Act to protect Mr. Diab from unjust prosecution and punishment abroad. Today, I am calling on the Government of Canada to provide immediate assurances that it will refuse to grant a second request for Mr. Diab's extradition to France and to work swiftly with the French authorities to end this ongoing miscarriage of justice. Mr. Diab and his family have gone through a nightmare that no one should ever experience. They deserve justice and a return to the peaceful life they experienced before this travesty began, and they deserve the full protection and defense of their national government. New Democrats will stand with Hassan Diab until this is fully achieved. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Put you on the spot. Don wasn't expecting that, so the next round of applause for Don. We put him on the spot there. Yay, Don. This has been going on for a long time. And those of you who have just arrived, perhaps you weren't here for the initial round of introductions, but kind of look around, and there's a whole generation of folks who have grown up learning about Hassan Diab, but there's some people who've been doing this work for a long time. And one person I want to point out is here today. You don't normally see Hassan's legal representatives necessarily, or anybody's legal representatives at a rally, but Don Bain is here today, who doesn't shut it off after 5 o'clock. He's 24/7 Hassan Diab, and he's been there since the start. And I've had the privilege, as have many of us, of being in court watching Mr. Bain as he's tried to pick apart the jello that gets thrown at him by the French officials and by the Justice Department officials. And much as we have gone away to coffee shops afterwards and you say, do you see what Don said there? Do you see what he said there? It's a real tribute that you've stuck by Hassan all these years and done so much work. So kudos to you, Don, for being here on this chilly afternoon as well. So speaking of a long time, I didn't get involved until almost 14 years ago when a woman by the name of Rhea Hanen, boy, that name pops up so many times. She called me up and I said, hi, Rhea, what's going on? She says, you have to come to dinner. And I said, where, at your place? And she said, no, at Hassan and Ranya's. And we had a lovely dinner. Hassan made these amazing falafel balls because he knows I'm a vegetarian. And that's where I learned and met Hassan Diab. And I said, oh, you're the guy everybody's talking about. Anyway, they certainly need no introduction, but they've been with Hassan from day one. Please welcome Ottawa's inimitable Raging Grannies. They're coming. You're good?
You're good.
Let's tell them. Add. Let's tell them.
Yeah, you're close to the mic.
Okay, we hope a lot of you have the words, and we'd love to hear you sing it along. It's a tune everybody knows when the saints go marching in.
We'll keep him here, Hassan Diab. No more French jail and Bafogab. And we'll fix that law extradition, so no more of us they'll nab. He wasn't there, and they should know. The proof should tell them that it's so. He was miles away in Beirut when that bomb was set to blow. The victims have the right to know who was the one who caused the blow. French court knows it wasn't Hassan, so drop the charge and tell him so. Mr. Trudeau, your words were strong. What happened to Hassan was wrong. Put those words now into action. Have a statement before long. To state it clear, for yes you can, for Hassan is a blameless man. Say it loud and without failing, to extradite never again. Never again.
Our next speaker is someone who has been around the world in his work for social justice in the global south and here across Turtle Island. He's also been a member for several decades of the Ottawa Quaker meeting. Please welcome Eric Schiller.
Hello, everybody. I want to give thanks again to the Raging Grannies. Thank you for your work, for all the good causes you've been supporting. I want to say a few words about Hassan Diab as a man. I've known Hassan over many years as a colleague, as a friend, and as a fellow professor. And you know, Hassan has always struck me as a gentleman. I'll say it again, as a gentleman. You know, all the suffering he's gone through, he could react with violence and hostility, but I never heard a word like that out of him. Hassan Diab is a man of peace. He's a peaceful man. And that has a lot of significance when you consider what he's being charged with. And Hassan Diab is a professor. When I hear him speak about a serious question, he's moderate, he's reasonable, and he's sensible, he's balanced. Not the kind of person that you would think would do a violent terrorist act. Now, when I first heard about what Hassan was accused of, I said, this is crazy. Somebody said there's something smelly going on here. We are talking about an act that occurred 42 years ago in Paris. At that time, Hassan Diab was 26 years old. And what was he doing? What would anybody be doing? He was planning to be a professor. He was doing his studies in Beirut, Lebanon. That's been well chosen, well proved. And also, as you look into the case against him, it's full of flaws. You've heard all about them. So I'm going to keep this short and brief. With all this in background, I would say, and we'll all say, what are we asking? One, three things. One, don't ever think of even sending this man back to France. Two, you say there's an extradition law, and Merenger, the judge, when he was sending him back for the first time, said, this man would not really be charged within Canada, but I have to. I'm bound by the extradition law. So the second thing is, fix this law. Reform it. Or failing that, scrap it, like the French have done. The third thing is, Hassan Diab is being accused by somebody, some embassy, somewhere, somehow, but it's all secret. We don't know what it is. How can you defend yourself against a person who you don't know who he is and you don't know why they're doing it? So to the government of Canada, here's a suggestion. If someone does a secret, hidden accusation against one of our citizens, we will not listen to it unless that person comes out of the shadows and shows us who they are and why they're pushing their thing. And now, Hassan is here somewhere, I think. I would say, my dear friend Hassan, out of this could well come a change. We could change this extradition law, we could change the whole thing, and then your suffering, your anguish, your terror, your dread will have some meaning. There will be good meaning come out of this. Let us all pray that it will. God bless you, my friend, Hassan Diab.
Thank you, Eric. And I really love what you said there, because Hassan, wherever he goes, is well liked and well loved. And Hassan, look around at this crowd. And look at all these people who have come out today to stand with you. People don't just do that because they got nothing better to do on a cold Sunday in Ottawa. There's a great deal of love for you in this community, and I hope that you are feeling that love today and every day as we go forward. You're going to hear shortly about the Dreyfus affair, which shook France and shook Europe. At the turn of the 20th century, it involved great names like Émile Zola, among others. The great document J'accuse was written. And again, this is a case that involves someone who was falsely accused with something that was handwritten, that was not his handwriting. And the Dreyfus affair went on for 12 years. Hassan Diab's quote-unquote affair is now entering its 15th year. And when you read the letters that were sent by Lucy Dreyfus to her husband, the love in those letters that went back and forth to Devil's Island is what pulled him through. And I think we need to acknowledge not only the kindness of Hassan Diab here today, but also the profound love and strength and commitment and dedication of Rania. I'm not sure if Rania is here today. She's not here today, but Rania is the rock that has led this campaign. Rania has spoken so many times. She's been at the Prime Minister's. We even went once into the House of Parliament, and she was able to talk her way in and get a meeting with a member of Parliament to demand, why is it that you guys are not actually doing anything for my husband while he is in France? And then the wheels start to slowly turn. Our next speaker today comes from an organization that does an amazingly courageous amount of work in a world where to speak these truths gets you into a lot of trouble. Her name is Michelle Weinroth, and she's with Independent Jewish Voices. And she is someone who is also a translator and a teacher and a writer, and has for many years spoken out for Hassan Diab. Michelle.
We stand here today to recall the moment of Hassan's brutal arrest because we are determined not to let our government slide into complacency. We remind those on the Hill who wield parliamentary power that French authorities have relentlessly persecuted Hassan, scapegoated him, vilified him with baseless accusations, determined as they are to punish him for a crime he did not commit. And we're here to say that both French and Canadian judiciaries have failed Hassan miserably. From the extradition hearings of 2011 to the shoddy rulings of the French Court of Appeal, a decade later in 2021, the law has betrayed Hassan every single time. Put yourself in his shoes. What would you do if you and your eminent attorney, Don Bain, had exhausted all legal avenues to prove your innocence, when courts both here and abroad had wronged you so shamelessly? To whom would you turn? You would turn to the people, to those who have come to know you over the years, who have studied every allegation, every smear and every falsehood that has defiled your name and caused you and your family indescribable anguish. The people across Canada who know you intimately, who have witnessed the torment to which you and your wife and your little ones have been subjected. The people who are incensed that your innocence has been sullied by a foreign state. They are the ones on whom you will count. We here are those people. And if we see that the winds of fate have steered Hassan's destiny in the wrong direction, it will be our task, the task of Canadians who care about human rights, to help redirect the course of Hassan's ship so that he can finally sail to freedom. For his liberty is also our liberty. We are all Hassan. We are all imperiled by extradition laws and by states that deploy them cynically for their own interests. Hassan Diab's salvation will constitute a precedent-setting liberty for all Canadian citizens. But only the power of a resounding voice from Canadians at large, from coast to coast, can guarantee his freedom. In the coming weeks, that voice must swell, like the waves of a tsunami crashing on the shores of Parliament. That voice must reach Justin Trudeau's ears, stir his conscience, and compel him to stand before his French peers. It must pierce his conscience and compel him to repudiate France's colonial arrogance. He must say, unhesitatingly, unabashedly, and categorically, no to a second extradition. For Trudeau has the certain power and prerogative to do this, and we, with all our might, with all our passion and commitment, have the power to keep his feet to the fire. And we will. Thank you.
Hassan Diab is innocent. The groundless charges against him reek of Islamophobia. They eerily echo the anti-Semitic Dreyfus affair over 100 years ago, when the Jewish French soldier Alfred Dreyfus was charged with treason based on a fraudulent handwriting analysis. Like Dreyfus, the case against Hassan rested on a false handwriting sample. And like Dreyfus, Hassan spent years in prison and is still fighting to be exonerated. It breaks my heart to see the harm this has imposed on Hassan and his family. It frightens me to realize that my government enables and collaborates in this hateful injustice. And it inspires me that you and so many others stand in solidarity with Hassan, calling for justice, truth, and loving kindness for Hassan.